Hi there, it's Florence here, and today I'm back again with another episode of my video knitting podcast thing. This will be the last episode from my uni room. I am having a fake graduation tomorrow. I can't graduate because of the marking boycott, but I will be wearing the outfit and pretending I'm graduating, so that's exciting. I've been knitting a lot lately. I have quite a few pieces to show. I finished the cardigan to wear to that May ball that I went to a week or two ago. I am working a lot on the shorts that I'm doing to match this camisole. I basically have a bunch of stuff to show you. As usual, I will start off by mentioning what I'm wearing. It's still pretty hot here, so basically the only knitwear that I can comfortably wear are my knitted summer tops, which I think have quite a lot of. When I go back home and I'm reunited with the rest of my knitwear, I am planning to film a video where I go over my entire summer top collection because I'm sure some people will be interested in that. They are some of my favourite pieces to knit and wear for sure. This camisole I featured in an episode maybe 2 or 3 episodes ago. It was freehand, so I don't have a pattern for you right yet. However, I have written this one up into a pattern and it is currently being tested. So I think I will be releasing a pattern for this one sometime in August. This is knitted up in merino from Knitting for Olive, which is my favourite yarn for summer tops. I've mentioned before, I live in the UK. It is rarely that hot. It has been quite hot lately, and we don't have any aircon or anything here, but I still find that the merino is generally pretty wearable, and I enjoy working with it a lot more than I enjoy working with plant fibres or silk. This is in the shade Nordic Beige, which I think is quite a pretty, it's not quite a grey and it's not quite a beige, it's somewhere in between. I really like it. And this top only took about 450 metres, I think. It wasn't very yarn hungry. So I suppose even though it's not a finished object, and I do have multiple finished objects to show, I will first of all show the shorts, which are a work in progress, just because it is also relevant to this top. So I mentioned when I made this camisole that my vision for it was to put together a 2-piece matching set. So I wanted a hand knit camisole and I also wanted a matching pair of hand knit shorts. So this is where I'm at right now. I am really close to being done with these. I've divided for the legs and I think this leg is almost long enough. I can probably bind off pretty soon and I just need to do the same on the other leg. Actually, one of the main reasons I chose this camisole to wear today was because I knew I would be filming this and I knew that when I show these shorts, this particular lace pattern, it's a very easy, very standard sort of eyelet lace rib. When it's not yet blocked, it looks very, very different. So these shorts look a little bit strange. They're definitely giving a little bit more sort of biker shorts right now. That's not my vision for them. I'm hoping they will be more of a relaxed fit. But this fabric will end up looking the same as the fabric from this top because it is knitted with the same stitch pattern, same yarn, same needles. I mean, you can see how much they stretch out. So yes, these are knitted from the top down. I have done an elasticated waistband and I've done a rib, just like a plain rib, on the waistband because I couldn't do the eyelet rib. If I did the eyelet rib for the waistband, the little eyelets would show the elastic through and the elastic colour doesn't match the colour of the yarn, and so that wouldn't look quite right. If I did a plain rib that matches up with the eyelet rib and then switched into that afterwards, I did increases pretty much the whole way down the shorts to add a little bit more room for the hips, and then I just divided for the legs in the same way that you normally would with a pair of shorts. I'm not super satisfied with how these increases are looking. You perhaps can't see, but the way I've done them I'm just not 100% happy with, so I think after I've done this I will do a couple of swatches and see if I can figure out how to do them in a way I like a little bit better. But then after that I will be putting these into testing as well if they turn out how I want them to, so that you guys can also knit up 2-piece matching slightly impractical hand knit sets if that's something you'd like as much as I'd like it to. I'm not sure about this colour. Maybe when I'm wearing the whole thing it's too much beige and I should have gone for a more colourful colour. I'm slightly regretting it, but it is a very pretty colour, that's for sure. Maybe for a jumper or something I would have liked it better. I thought these would also take up more yarn than they have. What I have here, this is what's left of the second ball of the Knitting for Olive merino that I've used for these shorts. So I'm just barely going to need to start the third, I think, to do the second leg of the shorts. So it's actually not very yarn hungry at all. It's not that much more than the camisole one. I figured it might be quite a bit more. It has definitely been a little bit of a time-consuming project since it is knitted on pretty small 3mm needles, but to be honest I always think that it's worth it because these projects that are knitted up on 3mm needles tend to be my favourites. So I think this will be such a nice piece to wear over the summer and I'm really looking forward to it. Okay, I'm going to set this aside and I will move on to talk about my big finished object that I have this episode. So in the last episode I mentioned that I was going to go to a May ball to celebrate the end of the academic year, and I showed the dress that I was planning on wearing. It's just a pretty plain cream, sort of slightly pleated dress. I picked it because it meant that I could knit a sort of beige-ish cardigan, which I figured I would wear a lot, because I don't want to knit something just for this occasion that I'm then never going to wear again, and a beige wrap cardigan is something that I know I will reach for more in the autumn and winter. So for this cardigan, my starting point was I wanted to make something that resembled the dark green cardigan that I knitted at the end of last summer. I have a pattern for that that's available on my Ravelry. I know a lot of people really enjoyed it, and I really like it too. But I wear that cardigan more like a top, personally. It's quite fitted, the sleeves are very, very fitted, and it has a modified raglan construction. So I think it's really nice with nothing underneath it, but for this dress I wanted something that's a little bit more oversized, a little bit more of a relaxed fit, but still that similar style. So I ended up knitting up this modified version of this wrap cardigan. These things are always such a pain to show on camera. They do not want to show up. I might just put this on actually. I will boil for a few minutes, but at least you will be able to see what it looks like, and I haven't had a chance to photograph it properly too. I will try to do that before I upload this video so I can put some photographs in. Okay, so hopefully you can see what we're working with here. It is a wrap cardigan. All the edges are double knitted, just as they were on the more fitted version that I made last year, and it had this longer ribbing on the bottom. The cardigan is definitely a little bit longer than the one that I made last year, and you can see the sleeves have a little bit more room in them as well. It has a slightly drop shoulder construction, although I did also do some short rows to shape the top of the sleeve. I might write a pattern up this, I'm undecided. It was just knitted freehand because I wanted this to wear for the event and I had a very specific vision for it. But if I do, I would probably knit up a second one and make some changes first. These sleeves are one of the things I would modify slightly. I think the armhole is a little bit too deep, and so these stitches don't look so pretty. Anyway, I have these big long ties. The green cardigan I made last year has the tie pass around the body on the inside of the cardigan and then come out on the side, so there's no visible tie wrapping around the back of the cardigan. But this one I've done the more traditional way, where this tie comes straight out on the side and then wraps around the back. I'm not sure that I like this. I think I might actually detach these ties and sew them back on again so that they wrap the same way as the one that I made last year. But anyway, here is what it looks like for now. You can see it's a little bit more of a relaxed fit, a little bit longer. The sleeves are long, which I like, and it does have this cute tie on the side. Okay, I've showed this, so I'm now taking it off because I am quite warm. So the yarn that I used for this project, I didn't buy specifically to work on this cardigan. I was originally planning on making a jumper with it, but then when I changed my mind about what dress I wanted to wear, and I knew that I wanted to make a light beige or cream wrap cardigan, I happened to have this yarn in stash and with me at uni, and so I figured I'd use it. This is knitted on 4.5mm needles using a slightly heavier fingering weight yarn and a mohair held together. The heavier fingering weight yarn that I used is this one. This is from Majo garn. It is, I think they call it fine merino. I have mixed feelings about this yarn. I think overall I'm really happy with the finished object and I would use it again, but this yarn, well, it very much depends on what your tastes are. I don't really use superwash yarn, aside from the environmental impacts, which I think are maybe slightly overblown in that if you're spending months making your own piece of clothing anyway, you're already doing a decent bit for the environment if that's stopping you from buying a bunch more fast fashion. And so if you want to use superwash yarn, I'm definitely not going to have a go at anybody for it. My primary reasons for not using it are just that I don't like it that much. I think it looks shiny, which I'm never a huge fan of. I don't like how it stretches out, and I don't like how it feels. This yarn is, according to Majo garn, I think they say it is non-superwash but unshrinkable. I don't entirely know what that means. I think a lot of companies that make claims about their yarn being environmental superwash alternative or anything like that don't actually put a lot of information out there, because I was trying to read more about it and I find it very hard to find anything. But supposedly this is treated in some other way that makes it unshrinkable. My point is, this still feels and looks a lot like superwash to me. If you're somebody who likes superwash yarn, I'm sure this isn't a problem. It is very stretchy, which I found a little bit fiddly when I was working with it. And it's maybe slightly shiny, although honestly I don't think that's too bad. If you're somebody who's quite sensitive to wool and only uses superwash because you find that it's not scratchy, this might work for you. It does have that sort of very non-scratchy, superwashy texture to it. And I will say the colour selection that this yarn comes in is really great. Whether you like bright colours or whether you like neutrals, the colour selection really caters to everybody, I think. More so than, for example, knitting for Olive, where their neutral selection is great, which suits me. But I think they're a little bit lacking in bright colours, although recently they have brought out a few more bright colours, which a lot of people have been enjoying. This colour is called Vanilla, and it's quite similar to, for example, the Knitting for Olive powder. I think it is like a slightly less saturated version of that, maybe. It's somewhere between a grey and a cream and a beige. I don't know. Hopefully you can see, it's quite pretty. I lightened it up a bit when I was knitting up the cardigan by holding it with cream mohair. Now, for the majority of this cardigan, I did use the majo garn mohair as well, which I think they call pearl mohair, and I used the colour ivory. My opinion on this mohair I mentioned in the last video, and I think it still holds. I think that this mohair is a nice midpoint, both in terms of price and in terms of how much I like it, between something like Drops, which is cheap and I like it less, but I still think it's good value because it is so affordable, and something like the Knitting for Olive or the Olivia, which is much nicer but also much more expensive. I think this sort of lies in between. It's in between in price. I'd say that it's in between how much I liked it. So I think it's a good value mohair, and if that's what suits your budget, then I do recommend it. I'm saying that like this is the majo garn mohair. This isn't. I did run out of the majo garn mohair while I was working on this cardigan. I had a ball at home, which I figured I would use, so I didn't buy as much mohair as I bought merino. But then since I'm at uni and I knitted it early for this May ball, I didn't have the ball with me. And so I ended up buying a ball of Rico mohair in cream from a local yarn shop. My thought process was that cream mohair always looks pretty similar, and especially because I'm holding it with something else, you aren't really going to be able to see the colour difference, if there is a colour difference. And you can't see it at all, but what I will say is that I do not like this Rico mohair. I find it to be very scratchy, it doesn't feel nice at all, and it wasn't cheap either. Like, I'm sorry if you can hear people in my house slamming doors. Everyone living in this house is driving me crazy at the moment, so I'm very sorry about that. What was I saying? This is a pretty expensive mohair. It's similar in price to the Knitting for Olive or the Olivia, and if you are willing to spend that kind of money, I would strongly recommend getting one of those, not this. The colour selection isn't great, it's scratchy. It works okay for getting this cardigan done on time. I mostly used it for the ties since I just barely ran out of the majo garn, so it didn't really matter, but there you go, a bonus mohair review since I did use this one a little bit as well. In terms of the cardigan, I mentioned a little bit about my feelings about it when I tried it on a moment ago. I talked about how I am thinking about switching the side that the long tie is on so that it ties in a more similar way to the cardigan that I made last year. I do like the drop shoulder, or it's not really a satin sleeve, drop shoulder, we'll call it that. I like the drop shoulder construction. I think the length is a little bit longer than I would necessarily like. I think part of that is because it is more of a superwash yarn, which I'm not so used to, and so the length grew more than I anticipated. But I think this is a length that a lot of people would like. Like, I think this is a standard non-cropped cardigan length. It's just that I tend to wear my cardigans cropped, and so when I push it on, it feels kind of strange to me. I'm touching this now and I can really feel the difference between the parts knitted with the two different types of mohair. Seriously, get the majo garn if you are looking at the Rico and the majo garn. It's so much nicer and it's cheaper too. Anyway, I don't know if I would bother taking down the length. I think that this might work really well with jeans that aren't high-waisted or not as high-waisted. And I think that the longer length works well with the relaxed fit as well. If I wanted something super cropped, I could wear the one that I made last year, and this sort of fills a different space in my wardrobe. Okay, so I will move on to my next finished object. I have a pair of socks. I have kind of lost my sock knitting motivation lately. I mentioned that during exams and during the final push for my dissertation, I was crazy about sock knitting. I was making so many, and right now I'm not feeling so enthusiastic about it, which is just fine. I can work a lot more on summer knits, and I'm sure I will be wanting to knit socks again soon. But I did finish the socks that I had just cast on in the last episode. These socks are one of the pairs from this book. This is the 52 Weeks of Socks Volume 2 book, which I think I've recommended a few times before on this channel. I really enjoy both the original 52 Weeks of Socks and this one as well. This is the pattern, and this is what it looks like in the book. So when it came to making these socks, I got the yarn first and then chose a pattern to pair with the yarn. This yarn I bought from my Ivory Room, which is a yarn shop I will mention again later. It is made by Olivia and Oliver Fibres, and it is a hand-dyed sock set. Now I have a lot of socks, a lot of hand knit socks. The last video on this channel was talking a lot about my hand knit socks, so feel free to check that one out if you're interested. Almost none of my socks are hand dyed. I just don't love the look of hand dyed yarn in general. But I do have, I think, 3 pairs of hand dyed socks now. When I do go for something hand dyed, I like to go for something that's not too busy. I think a big part of the reason why I don't tend to go for hand dyed sock yarn is that I enjoy knitting socks with fancy patterns in terms of like stitch patterns, lace, cables, things like that. And so if I go for a very busy looking hand dyed yarn, those aren't really going to get the opportunity to shine like I'd like them to. So I tend to go for quite plain hand dyed yarns when I do get them, and I think this one is really nice. So this is the, as I said, Olivia and Oliver Fibres sock set, and the colours that I have are Feather for this main colour and Cacao for the mini. So Feather is a cream colour which has dark brown speckles in it, and it also has some sort of pinky tones in it, which I didn't see so much online, but I think it looks quite pretty. And then Cacao is just a deep brown which matches the speckles in Feather quite nicely. In terms of the texture, this is a super standard superwash hand-dyed merino sock yarn. It feels kind of as you'd expect given that. And I think when I talk about a sock yarn like this, I do have to mention the price. This stuff is expensive. Hand-dyed sock yarn is expensive, which is another reason why I don't tend to reach for it. Like, there are a lot of tonal, I think they call it tonal, sort of plain coloured hand-dyed sock yarns that I think are pretty and I would use, but they're so much more expensive than just buying commercially dyed yarn that if I'm not really going for that hand-dyed look, there's no point in me spending extra. This though, I think with the speckles, it's really special, but I did pay, I'm not 100% sure, but I want to say like close to £30 for the set. Point is, it costs like 3 times as much as a commercially dyed sock worth of yarn would cost me, and so that does have to be taken into account. As a treat though, I found it really fun to knit with. There's something so satisfying about doing a contrast toe and heel with a yarn that's specifically chosen to match your main colour. Obviously, because it does have these speckles in it, I figured that whatever design I do on the sock might not show up super well, so I wanted to go for a design which, and it's a little bit hard to explain, but I wanted to go for something that reads more as all over texture than as a specific design. So these socks I think worked really well for that. They have a ribbed pattern on them with a lot of texture, which I will get up close and show you in a moment. What I will say is, these socks were more work than I thought they'd be. It is actually quite an involved stitch pattern in that it has a lot of tiny cables in it, and so you do have to be concentrating, and it wasn't a quick knit. I almost feel like, given you can't really see the cables that well and it does just give the overall impression of being textured, there might have been something quicker I could have done, like I think they're called the Luck socks I showed in the previous episode. They were much faster to knit and had a similar sort of look to them. So hopefully you can see the pattern here. This is like a broken rib, and then there's like a twisted stitch rib, and these are little tiny cables, so 1-1 cables where you cross the stitches every other row. You may have seen when I showed the book close up, the original sock has a contrast, I think, toe and cuff. I went for a contrast toe and heel, just personal preference. And you can also see the really pretty speckled hand-dyed yarn. And I do like all this extra colour variation you get as well in between the speckles. I think it's really lovely. So yes, these socks were definitely a treat, a little bit more of an expensive project, although I do have to say, socks are still an affordable project because even hand-dyed, this costs a lot less than most jumpers would cost to knit, and it probably took pretty much as long as an Aran weight jumper would take me to make. So in terms of, you know, enjoyment stitches for your money, I don't think it's too bad. They're a very pretty pair of socks that I'm really happy to have in my collection, and unfortunately it is probably too hot to wear them now, but I will put them away until the weather cools down slightly and they will get a lot more wear in the autumn. They are a lovely autumn colour scheme, so that's quite nice. I will very briefly mention, I did cast on a new pair of socks. I actually sent a lot of my yarn home from uni already, so I didn't have much available, but I did have the box that I was sent by Lulu Knits as a gift from Korea. So this is a Korean sock yarn, I believe it's called Slow Step. I'm not entirely sure, it's not something that's easy to get here at all. I've cast on, I mean, there is nothing to show. There's a twisted rib cuff, or some of a twisted rib cuff here. These are going to be the Marie socks by Yucca. Maybe I will put a picture in. I never do this because I always feel a bit weird putting other people's pictures in my video. Like, what if they're copyrighted and they're going to get mad at me? But very much credit, this is the picture from the Ravelry page. I assume I'll put in here. Please, editing Florence. Anyway, I've made a lot of socks by Yucca. I think Yucca writes really great sock patterns. I think that she's doing a mystery sock cowl next month. It's called like the berry mystery sock cowl. I'm so tempted by it. I've never done a mystery knit along before, ever, even though I've been knitting for quite a long time. I feel like the risk of the pattern ending up being something I don't like is way too high. I'm quite picky. I don't really make shawls because I don't think I would use them. But actually socks might be the thing. I don't think Yucca's made many pairs of socks that I don't like, ever. So I think I could buy the pattern with relative confidence, and even if I don't like it, it's not really a problem. I can just reuse the yarn to make a different one of her sock patterns. I might sign up for that. Maybe. I think there's a discount on it ending today, so maybe I should do that. Anyway, I strongly recommend her sock patterns. Not sponsored. She did follow me on Instagram, which made me feel very honoured. But I have recommended them to a lot of people, and I know a lot of people have started knitting Yucca sock patterns because I talk about them so much. They're lovely, and they're a really great way to pick up a wide variety of sock knitting skills because her patterns are knitted with loads of different techniques and constructions. Okay, so I will move on to my next work in progress. But I think to do so, I should probably talk a little bit about some of the stuff that I've bought recently and a little trip to London that I went on a couple of weeks ago. So once my exams were finished, I had a lot more free time and I could do whatever I wanted. And so since Cambridge is a pretty short train ride away from London, takes about 45 minutes maybe to get to King's Cross, I thought I'd go on a little trip to London for a day and do some shopping. And we don't really have a great yarn shop here, so I wanted to go to a yarn shop in London. And I of course went to my Ivory room, which is in Chiswick. A little bit of a further tube journey out of the city. But Valentina, who runs the shop, is so lovely. She's tested me a couple of times, and I went to the shop opening as well. Every time I go in there, I buy a bunch of stuff. The shop doesn't necessarily stock the widest range of yarn out of every shop I've seen. It is new and relatively small, but I feel like there's something about Valentina's taste in yarn that's just so well aligned with mine that almost every single yarn she gets in, I want to try. And I think she also puts a real emphasis on choosing yarn to stock, which isn't widely available in a lot of other shops in the UK, so you get to try a lot of different stuff. When I went along, she had just put up the display for a load of yarn from Gepard garn. Gepard is stocked in quite a few different shops in the UK, but it's never the full line. It's always like one yarn here, one yarn there. I have seen their cash sock I showed a couple of episodes ago. I bought from Beautiful Knitters, but they don't have the whole line by any means. But I know that their yarns are really popular and I was really tempted to try them. So I went in and I squished all of the Gepard, and I ended up buying 2 different yarns from the new Gepard selection. Firstly, this is maybe Gepard's most popular yarn. This is Wild and Soft, and it is a fingering weight yarn that is 60% merino wool and 40% silk. Wild tussar silk, which I believe that is more ethical, but I will maybe look it up and leave a note in the description because I'm not 100% sure. I got it in this really pretty light grey colour, and I only bought 3 balls because I wanted to use these to make a summer top. It doesn't maybe at first touch feel like such a great summer fibre, but it is just merino, which I find is fine for summer, and silk, which is a summer fibre, so I figured the blend would work quite well. To describe this yarn, I think it's not as soft or as uniform in appearance as the Pasquale Saphira, which I showed a couple of episodes ago. I knitted a striped t-shirt in it. I love that merino silk blend. This one is a little bit less even in look, I suppose. I think it's a little bit less round, and it makes your stitches look slightly less even, but it is a really pretty look. Like, something about it looks really delicate, and I don't think that many people would find it scratchy. Like, it's not as exceptionally soft, but it's not irritating at all. I have to say I really like it. It is also quite a bit cheaper than the Pasquale Saphira, which is the other merino and silk blend yarn that my Ivory room stocks. I was so excited about it that I did pretty much cast it on straight away. So last summer I did cast on and start to knit a camisole. I was using back then the Knitting for Olive merino again to knit it, and I wasn't loving how it was coming out. I had some issues with stitch counts and the fit wasn't quite what I wanted. I was knitting it top down, so I was juggling all these annoying little pieces that I would then have to assemble, and then when I assembled them, I found that it didn't fit how I wanted to, and I was having to take all the pieces. It was just annoying me. And so I ended up abandoning the project, but that vision, that like design of a camisole is still something that I really want, and so I figured I would give it another go. This time I'm knitting it bottom up. I've mentioned before I am a top down in the round knitter pretty much always, but with camisoles sometimes I like to knit them bottom up because I do find it less fiddly. Also, because the shorts have a lot going on, I really wanted a stockinette project, and so when I cast this on, my main goal was to have something that I can just knit mindless stockinette on, and so if I knit it bottom up I can get to the mindless stockinette point as quickly as possible. My vision for this was to have a very simple tank top camisole kind of thing with no ribbing. So it is stockinette with folded hems, and it's going to have a folded hem along the front as well, and then double knit straps that run along the side of the panel with the folded top. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's the vision and we're going to see how it goes. As usual, I'm knitting on 3mm needles. These are my needles from Knit KA, which are my favourites, and I am using this gepard Wild and Soft. I'm really enjoying this yarn. It isn't as uniform looking as the Knitting for Olive because the yarn isn't so round or so consistent, but I am in love with the colour variation on this. I don't know if you can see it, but it's one of those lovely greys which has sort of darker and lighter sections to it. It looks really pretty, and it gives a beautiful lightweight fabric that I think is probably going to be quite summer friendly. Obviously we'll have to see how it goes, but I have high hopes for it so far. I have been speeding through this. I only cast it on, I don't know, 3 or 4 days ago, and I've been working on the shorts and other stuff alongside it as well. But it is such a joy to knit. I am absolutely loving it. So I think that probably by the next episode this will be done, hopefully, and I'll be able to show the finished result to you. It's tricky because I do, you know, design things, and so I feel like I should be knitting a season ahead so that if I'm designing a summer top I can release it in the summer. I should probably start knitting it in like January, February, and yet I'm still here in, well, it's July tomorrow at the time of filming this, and I'm still knitting summer tops just because that's what I want to be knitting this time of year. In the heat I find mohair is really difficult to handle. I did buy this little electric fan from Muji and it has been life-changing. I love it, but still. So this might be a next summer release. Maybe I won't release it. I don't write patterns for everything that I knit. It's only things that I think people will enjoy or things that I think will come out well to a pattern. But I think that this is also the kind of garment that I will wear all winter as well. A very plain base layer that can go under a lot of different jumpers, cardigans, or under a shirt is something that I do find really useful in other seasons as well. And I do especially like merino for that type of garment. Anyway, last year I was knitting summer tops into September and they still got wear, so I'm just going to keep going with that. Now the other yarn that I bought, because as I said I got 2, I'm even more excited about. This I actually had never seen before. I think the Wild and Soft is stocked in one other shop maybe in the UK. This I have not seen anywhere else, and so I was so excited to take a look at it. I hadn't even heard of it and I went in not intending to buy it, but I was so captured by it that I had to get a certain quantity. This yarn is called Woolia and it is from Gepard. What does it say? 100% organic merino wool. The sheep is an old local Italian merino breed living in its original habitat in Italy. It says it will have a 17 stitch gauge on 5mm needles, but it also claims that it can be knitted on anything from a 3.5 to a 6mm needle. They do give different suggested needle sizes and I think gauges for different types of garment on the page for this yarn. Something really cool about it is a thicker yarn. I'll show you in a second the swatch I knitted, but it actually has 133 meters per 50 grams, which for something that you're going to knit on up to like a 5.5mm needle is kind of a lot. For comparison, the Drops Nepal, which I think is quite a popular yarn that's maybe slightly thicker than this, but not significantly, I'd say it's very comparable. The Drops Nepal is like 70 something meters maybe per 50 grams. So this being 130 something, and this is inexpensive. I want to say on my Ivory Room's website it's like £5.50 a ball. That is really quite affordable for 133 metres of pretty thick yarn. You don't need that much to knit a full jumper out of this. So I think this is a super affordable project. Obligatory, this is all not sponsored, I bought this stuff. I'm just really excited about this yarn. And I actually recommended it to my mum. She's been looking for some yarn to knit a jumper she wants to make, one of the Fable knitwear jumpers with the big sleeves. And those jumpers, okay, I'm going on a bit of a tangent here. Those jumpers are so curious to me because I think the recommended gauge is 16 stitches, but the recommended yarn is fingering weight yarn and mohair. So I'm just very curious as to how anybody, and the needles aren't that big either, how anybody gets a 16 stitch gauge with finger weight yarn and mohair. I guess we all knit differently. I don't think I'd be able to, that's for sure. And so I was a little bit puzzled. Like, obviously I have a bit more knitting experience than my mum. By a bit, I mean quite a lot. So I tend to help her with stuff like choosing yarn because she doesn't really know where to start. And I was really stuck helping her choose something for this because I couldn't see how she would ever get that gauge with the recommended yarn. And so I was looking for something that's pretty lightweight that could knit to a 16 stitch gauge, and I ended up suggesting this to her, and she's also ordered it and really likes it as well. The colour I have is 590, which I think the name of this, it doesn't say on the label, I think it's anthracite. So it's in theory a dark grey, but it's very much a blue-grey. It was sitting on the shelf next to the one called navy, and this just reads as a less saturated dark blue, I would say, than the navy one. Somewhere between a grey and a blue. We all know that's the kind of colour I like the most. So, I knitted a swatch up. I don't normally knit big swatches. I know that I should. I knitted this swatch up on 5mm needles, and I got a 16 stitch gauge. I'm getting up close to show you, but I'm not actually sure how much you can see. I mean, you can kind of see some light passing through it, but I think this feels like it wouldn't be a very see-through jumper at all. You're only going to see through it if you hold it up to the light like this. Like, based on this swatch, I think I will end up using a 5mm needle to knit with it. And I do have a vision for just a super plain staple jumper that I will reach for all the time with this yarn. I don't have very many dark coloured garments like this. I actually like this colour. I don't think it's going to be as hard on the eyes to knit as a black jumper would be. And besides, if it's a very simple garment, I don't need to really be able to see what I'm doing that much anyway. The texture of this yarn reminds me the most of like out of yarn I've tried, and this isn't a great comparison at all, but it reminds me a little bit of the Durham Natura Gilliat, in that it has that sort of very matte, dry texture to it. It's not that soft, but it's not scratchy at all. Like, I could probably wear this against my neck with no problem, in the same way that the Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino or the Durham Natura Gilliat are. But I'd say this yarn is a little bit stretchier, or quite stretchy really, just like the Gilliat. The difference is that this yarn is like, I guess, a 2-ply, and it's got that very obvious sort of 2-ply look to it. I don't know if that makes any sense. It's a lot less round than the Gilliat, but the texture's kind of similar. I'm just so excited to use it. It doesn't come in a lot of colours. It has a few neutrals, and then it has like a few really bright colours, or at least this is what's stocked at my Ivory Room. The bright colours are not at my street, but I think they're really cool. There's a magenta, a bright orange, and like a bright green as well. I don't know, I'm really excited to try this. If I like it, maybe I will reach for it for another project. I was just really impressed at how nice and how affordable it is. So the one other thing that I bought in that shop, not yarn, I got the My Knitting Notes. Got it dirty already, so good job, Florence. This is a book that Liner Publishing, so the same company that do these sock books and magazines and stuff as well, they make these knitting notebooks. I write all my knitting notes on the Notes app on my phone, which is not very pleasing. So I thought it would be really nice to have a book to just write down all that stupid stuff I write, like how many pattern repeats my foot is for a certain sock so I can make the second one the same, or what needle size I've used for different swatches, what needle size I want to use with a certain yarn, and what gauge in it's up to. So I figured this could be really useful for that. The colour wouldn't have been my first choice. I think the way the colour works with these books is they like make one colour and then they sell out and then they'll manufacture a different colour, and so right now it's this pink colour, which I do think is quite pretty, but they used to have a dark green, which I really liked, and I didn't buy it, and I kind of regret that now. Anyway, I'm looking forward to writing in it, and it is a knitting adjacent purchase from a yarn shop, so yeah. That's all I have to show in terms of new yarn today. It's in fact not the only new yarn that I have picked up. Knit Yarn, Knit with 2 T's, did a sale a few weeks ago. I think it was a shop anniversary sale, and it was 20% off everything, including all sandnes garn, which is a yarn that doesn't go on sale very often. I mentioned before, last year I knitted an Oslo hat for my boyfriend using the sandnes garn Double Sunday, and I loved that yarn, and I have been really wanting a jumper made out of it, but it is a fairly expensive merino. And so when they had this 20% off sale, I did pick up a sweater quantity of the Double Sunday. I just had it delivered to my home, so I don't have it here. Oh, and I think I got like a couple of balls of regular non-double Sunday as well in one of the new petite knit colours. I think it's a new petite knit colour. It's a soft blue, so that I can make a summer top as well. So those are at home, and I'm looking forward to being reunited with them when I head home after my fake graduation. And I think that's about it today. I feel like it's been a shorter episode, even though I rambled a lot. So with that, thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.